Hi, Analisa 6 here with the Lady of Leisure and the Sober Curator to bring you the November 2023 horoscope for the zodiac sign of Taurus for sun and rising placements. Taurus, we are in Scorpio season starting out the month of November, which is the polar opposite of you. So Scorpio and Taurus are the opposites of each other in the zodiac. Taurus is fixed earth and Scorpio is fixed water. So this time of year might be challenging for you unless you yourself have a lot of Scorpio energy. I weirdly know a lot of Scorpios who have a lot of Taurus energy. Like Taurus rising or Taurus moons or things like that. I don't think I know as many Taurus people with Scorpio placements in terms of sun sign with Scorpio placements, but if you have a lot of Scorpio in your chart, you might enjoy this time of year. I know I feel like there's a lot of Taurus people that love Halloween and love fall and this whole kind of vibe. But we're in November, half of the month is Scorpio season, and we're starting to enter into kind of more of the winter feelings that can sometimes lend itself towards seasonal depression. And I think it's kind of common for people to experience more tension when the sun is opposite them. So, you being a Taurus, that means that the sun is opposite you when it's in Scorpio, which sometimes can feel discombobulating or like you're being pulled into energy that's not as comfortable to what you're used to. Scorpio also, being the ruler of the 8th house and the fixed water sign, it represents our connection to the occult and kind of more of this like deeper subconscious energy that has to do with what we're feeling under the surface and how we transmute energy and how we move through energy. And Taurus really likes to kind of cling on to the familiar comfort zones. Not that Scorpio doesn't like certain things like that either, but Scorpio is more about embracing change and, the death and rebirth kind of cycle. And so you might be feeling a little uncomfortable and like there's a lot of change afoot that feels uncomfortable, but it might be, you might be called upon in November to embrace more change or more transmutation of energy. But let's go ahead and get into kind of where some of the Scorpio energy is happening in the Taurus horoscope. So we have a stellium in Scorpio happening where the sun, Mars, Mercury, and Ceres are all in Scorpio opposing you. And it's happening in the area of the chart that has to do with personal relationships. So this could be dating. This could be somebody that you're married to or in a partnership with already. This could also be a best friend type of partnership or even a business partnership. And so, when we're going through a transit that's really heavy like this, our relationships are highlighted. And in Scorpio, we might be having a lot of conversations that are intense. There might be a lot of having to mitigate and figure out how to constructively move forward in the relationship. There might be a lot of emotion in the conversations, having Mercury and Scorpio. Mars and Mercury and Scorpio here can also be reactive. So we might feel a little bit more irritable or touchy or emotionally reactive. We might need to have more conversations about what's happening for us under the surface in the relationship as well. And, I feel like Taurus sometimes is known as an archetype, not saying that you listening to this or this person, because you might not be, but as an archetype, Taurus alone is known for suppressing and stonewalling. And so in Scorpio, we might be being asked and pushed out of that behavior. And we're being asked to be more vulnerable, to be more open about our feelings. But it might come about in a triggered way because Taurus tries to suppress and will stonewall. I'm fine, everything's fine, when really it's not fine, and then it comes out in this other way. So you are at risk of doing that. If you are more mature and more elevated and more in touch with your feelings in a constructive way because you've done that work on yourself, you might not relate to that. And so you might be more ready, like, I'm going to work on this in therapy. I need to talk about this with my partner. I want to do this. So it just kind of depends on where you're at in your own emotional development, how that manifests. But there's a lot of opportunity for you to, work on hard things in a relationship and move forward. And, also if you're single and you're dating, this might be a time where you feel overly promiscuous, as Scorpio also rules sex, and Mars in Scorpio can also enhance our desire to connect in kinky or sexual ways. And so if you are pleasure seeking in that way right now, that could be enhanced. This isn't happening in the area of the chart that rules sex, but it is happening in the sign that rules sex in the relationship part of the chart. So I feel like there's an opportunity there for more hanky panky if you want it. This is also reinforced by some of the transits that are happening later in the month. So Mercury will be entering Sagittarius on the 9th, and it will be moving into that area of the chart that has to do with sex, death, rebirth, the area that Scorpio traditionally rules. And Mercury in this area, there's a highlight on finances that are shared with either family, banks, institutions, also romantic partners that we live with in a marital sense, or even just in a like common law kind of way. Like if you live with your partner and you guys are splitting money and sharing resources, there's a lot of opportunity for conversations around how those things are going. It's also a really positive time for you to figure out any kind of bureaucracy around assets or taxes or loans, investments, that type of thing. There's also an opportunity for you to do deep work on yourself, and also an opportunity to work on your relationship to sex and sexual energy in the relationship. So that's highlighted for Taurus in the month of November. Another thing that we're starting out with in November is Venus is finishing up her time in Virgo, and the area of the horoscope that's been happening for the Taurus dominant person is the area that has to do with creativity and self-expression. So she'll be finishing up her time in Virgo for the first week, and then on the 8th, she's going to be moving into her home sign of Libra. And the area of the chart that represents for the Taurus individual is the area that has to do with our health, how we're taking care of ourselves. It also has to do with our daily routine and how we're of service. And Venus here is really positive in terms of focusing on getting things in order, focusing on your health in a positive way, and doing things that promote structure and organization, and also getting your ducks in a row when it comes to the service or the work that you're doing in the world as well. So that's really positive energy for you. And Venus is your ruler. Venus is the ruler of Taurus. And so it's also positive that she's going to be in another area that she does well in for you. Venus will be in Libra for the rest of the month, just like Mercury will be in Sagittarius as of the 9th for the rest of the month. Let's see here. What else do we want to talk about? Mars is going to be in Scorpio in that area of relationship up until the 24th, and then it'll join Mercury and the Sun in Sagittarius. But Mars hanging out in the area of relationship means that there is a lot more potential for conflict this month in your relationship. And so you are in a position of having to work through a lot of conflict with a partner or somebody that you're in a relationship with. It could be best friend versus romantic relationship. But through that conflict, you might reach peace and resolution, having Venus and Libra to kind of help in that transition too. When Mars moves into Sagittarius and joins Mercury and the Sun in that area that has to do with shared assets and resources, it's really important that you're really careful and mindful with your investments, money, any kind of thing that you're doing in that way. Mars in this area of the chart has been known to cause some conflict in marriage. And so if you are married and you are navigating some conflict in a marriage or in a relationship, that is something that you could still be working through for the month of November. So there's kind of a continuation of that. And it could be around more of the bureaucracy that comes through sharing our lives with someone when it comes to finances and shared assets, resources, things like that. Also, Mars here can make us more kind of like how I was talking about with Mercury, where there's an opportunity to reflect on what our needs are sexually or what our relationship is to sex. Mars here can also enhance our desire for physical and sexual intimacy. So there's a little bit of a boost there as well. These two energies here have us reflecting on values and belief systems too. So our values and belief systems around marriage and money and debt, things like that. Even our values and belief systems around how we perceive death is also highlighted here. The sun is going to be joining the Sagittarius party on the 23rd. And so when that happens, that whole area of the chart is highlighted for Taurus too. So relationships are a huge theme for the Taurus rising and Taurus sun person. Your partnerships, how you disperse money, how you disperse your relationship to anything that you're building together. I don't know if disperse is really the right word. I guess it would be, I think of disperse as like how you're allocating the resources and the money that you're bringing in, and then how you're allocating that together, if that makes sense. So like, you know, if there's two incomes, a lot of times you'll talk about who's paying for what, or where's this money come from, or whose bills are going to what. I'm a housewife, so I don't make any money right now. And so kind of the similar conversations that happen in my house are, you know, not just like, I guess income doesn't matter who it's coming from. We still talk about where is this income going? Like we were talking about Christmas this year, and we're like, you know, money's tighter this year than it was last year. And, you know, how do we want to have Christmas this year? Do we want to just spend less, maybe get one thing for the house that would be nice, and just do something fun together and not worry about buying a bunch of gifts? You know, like those types of conversations are very much eighth house conversations when you live with someone and you're talking about your disbursement of money and how you're dealing with things. And then also investments, you know, where are we investing money? You know, are we taking any loans out? Things like that. Those are all themes that can be there. And then sexual intimacy can be a theme too. So big themes for Taurus. And then let's just go ahead and talk about the moons that are happening. So starting out in November, on the 13th of November, we have a new moon in Scorpio. So it's when the sun and the moon make a conjunction, and that's happening in the area of the Taurus chart that has to do with partnership and relationship. And so new moons are all about setting intentions towards things that we want to manifest or grow in our lives over the next cycle. By cycle, usually another month. And this is an opportunity for you where if there's changes that need to be made in your relationship dynamic with other people that you're close with, especially romantic partnerships, this is an opportunity for you to set those intentions and tell the universe, this is what I want to change. This is what I want to manifest into my life. On November 27th, we're going to have our full moon at 4 degrees of Gemini. And the full moon, you know, it's Sagittarius sun, moon in Gemini, and the area of the chart that that's happening in is the area that we spent most of this time talking about, the shared resources, assets. And so the sun is going to be in that shared resources, assets, sex, marriage, all those things. Like that's where the sun's going to be. The moon's going to be in Gemini in the opposite place that has to do with your personal relationship to money and stability, and also your self-worth. And so those are the themes that come up during the full moon for the Taurus dominant person. And the full moon's a time for setting intentions around things that we want to call in, as well as things that we want to release and let go. And Gemini and Sagittarius has a lot to do with how we communicate our perspectives, perceptions of things, also our belief systems and our values about things. And so this is a positive time to set intentions around what you want to call in around those things, but also what you want to release. So if there's certain, like, if we're going to focus on the Gemini moon part, if there's certain stories in your head that you have about what you're worthy of that are not serving you, this would be a great time to set an intention to let that go. You know, I think that the world matches what we believe or perceive about what we're worthy of to an extent. I mean, I'm skeptical about everything, but I think that you know, we've got a lot of law of attraction kind of jargon that I'm not anti-law of attraction, because I think there is a little bit to that. Well, I think there's a lot of it to it, to be honest, but I'm anti like, well, if you believe this, then that's why it happened to you, you know, because I think that the law of attraction stuff gets used in a really awful way, like a negligent way, like, oh, well, if you're just not positive enough, then, you know, like cults use a lot of that stuff to gain control over people. Like the Nixium cult is a great example of a group of people that were like breaking people down and being like, oh, well, you have to, you know, believe that you're the cause of everything that's happened to you, even the bad stuff. And I don't agree with any of that. But I think that, I think we might have trick-or-treaters outside. The dogs are getting all excited. I put a bull out in hopes that nobody would knock on the door, but I think that the dogs can just sense when people are walking up. But I'm getting derailed now. My point in what I'm talking about is that sometimes we have stories in our head for whatever reason, like what society, how we were raised, something we read, whatever. Like we all have stories about ourselves and what we're worthy of, right? And I think I'm going to share an anecdote. We're going to go into a story. So I had a dream car. Well, I've had many dream cars. And of course, I mean, this isn't like an first thing, but I grew up with my family laughing at me for all of the cars that I wanted and being like, that'll never happen. Or, yeah, right. You know, that kind of attitude. And even my husband, even my partner kind of did that to me. And of course, I like old cars. I like cars that are totally impractical. I understand. Like, I get being a 16-year-old and being like, I want a 55 Thunderbird. Like, I would laugh at a 15-year-old for saying that too, probably. No, I wouldn't, because that happened to me. I wouldn't do it. But, you know, I grew up with a dad that really liked old cars that were always falling apart. And so for me, it's like, I like that stuff. I know it's totally impractical. I know you need money to have it. Like, I know that it's not, my parents weren't going to get me a 55 Thunderbird, but you know, those were dreams and aspirations that I had. And over the years, I really wanted to get to a place where I could manifest a dream car into my life. And at the time when I was kind of starting to get more serious about that, I was in my mid-20s. And I ended up in a situation where I wanted to manifest a Jeep into my life, a Jeep Wrangler. And I did. I got myself into a position where I could do it, and I did it. And I learned a lot about manifesting dreams that are not always the best thing for you, because that Jeep was a problem and I got rid of it last year. And I'm still sad about it. Like, even though my Jeep was terrible in so many ways, I loved that car. It was my dream car. And this is the anecdote. So there was something in me that felt like I needed to prove to not just myself, but my family that laughed in my face or just made me feel diminished for the type of car that I wanted, and my partner, to be like, no, I can do this. And, you know, when you're a woman, a young woman, there's even more of like a desire to prove that you can do that yourself, right? And so the car for me was a symbol of overcoming an obstacle that I knew I was going to feel a really big sense of accomplishment and like I won if I accomplished that. But I didn't anticipate what happened after I accomplished it, which was shame. So once I had this like beautiful, it wasn't a brand new Jeep. Like, I think I bought it in 2015 and it was a 2013. No, it was later than that. It was 2017. 2018. It was 2018. I bought it in 2018 and it was a 2013. So it was 5 years old already, but it was in really good shape. Like, it looked practically brand new and it was in just immaculate shape, which is why I bought it. I thought it was going to be a great car. But it was so nice and so pristine that when I started driving it and showing up to my clients' houses, I started to feel like it was too nice for me. And I was starting to go like, oh no, what if my clients feel like they're paying me too much money? Or what if I'm not worthy of this car? Or, oh no, this isn't a shit box and I've always driven a shit box. And so what if like I'm not meant to be elevating in this way? Like, I had this whole weird shame spiral with it. And then the car started having problems immediately. So then I went into this whole, I'm an idiot. I can't believe I bought this. I can't believe I did this. I got in a fight with the dealership over the car because this was like 3 days into purchasing the car. I fought for myself. I advocated for a warranty. Like, I did all these things that, to me, this was during my Saturn return. So I was like, this is like Saturn lessons. I'm learning how to, you know, have my own authority and all this stuff. And, you know, I got through that hell 6 months that it took to kind of figure all that stuff out and thought I was going to be good to go. Like, I worked on my self-worth around the car and like kind of, you know, made a whole identity around the car. And the car just continued to have problems. It just continued to have a lot of problems. But you know what? Everywhere I went, I got compliments in that thing. It felt like me. It felt like a part of me. And I felt very invested in the car and in taking care of the car. And my husband hated the car. Like, he hated it, and it created a lot of tension and problems in our marriage, because every time the car had a problem, we would have problems. And so I had this reflection with that whole cycle, where there was a story that I had in my head about this car symbolizing that I was worthy of something, and then getting it and going through the whole process of still not feeling worthy of it, and then getting to a point where I realized the car wasn't worthy of me because it was such a pile of shit. And it was such an interesting lesson, because obviously material possessions should not define our worth, and that's such a stereotype of like, I have to have this car and I have to have this house, and I totally fell into that. I didn't fall into it in the beginning because I was trying to keep up with the Joneses. It felt more of like this, I was told I couldn't do it, so I'm going to prove that I can. But then I wasn't expecting that my own, like, what I thought I was worthy of would come out. I didn't know that once I had a nice car, on the outside anyways, that I would feel unworthy of it, because in my head, I always felt like I was worthy of nice things. But once I had nice things, I didn't feel worthy. And then the irony was that the nice thing that I had just worked for wasn't even that nice to begin with. And it was constantly falling apart. Like, it was a lemon pretty much. So even though it was really beautiful on the outside, the inside was not beautiful. Like, it was terrible. I still miss it though. Like, I had so much fun in that car. I love that Jeep. Like, I will be haunted by that Jeep for the rest of my life probably, but I'm glad I don't have it anymore. Like, I'm glad that I, got rid of it and didn't force it any more than I already had. But I think that when we're acknowledging our stories about self-worth, I think it's really important that we don't put our worth on material objects for that reason, because, those things are temporary and fleeting. And one of the epiphanies that I've had about self-worth recently, and this is like very Taurus, very Leo, like both kinds of things, is that women specifically are taught to be humble in certain ways, where we're made to feel like we're too much or high maintenance if we require a certain level of luxury or comfort. And there's kind of this glorification in our society of things being hard and there being a lot of discomfort in order for us to feel like we've earned the comfort. And I'm starting to have this kind of like other perspective open up to me because of the chronic illness that I have, where I'm realizing, and I also have been reading a lot of literature about this too, but we are all worthy of stability, comfort, safety, and nice things. We're all worthy of that in my mind as humans, regardless of where we live, regardless of what we're born into. And this idea that we have to earn it is capitalist structure, right? Because how else do you get people to work hard? And it's just, we should all be given the right to have comfort to some extent. And I think Taurus rules working hard. The second house rules working hard. And I'm not saying we shouldn't all work hard for each other as a society and as people that come together as a community. Like, that's the Aquarius part, it's like we should all work hard for each other and we should all be useful, like Arnold Schwarzenegger says, we should all be useful. But I don't think that we don't have to compromise. We don't have to compromise comfort to be useful. We don't have to compromise worthiness to be, like, the two can coexist and be just as valuable. And I think that I was raised in such a way to think that you had to sacrifice, like you couldn't have both truths, I guess, like you couldn't have both. And the Leo in me is like, yes, you can. So I think that my anecdote may not land for everybody, depending on where you're at in yourself. But I think that if you are somebody that has scarcity mindset or poverty mentality or fear, and this full moon comes up in Gemini, the area it's hitting in the chart might bring that up. It's the 5 of Pentacles, which is ruled by Taurus in the tarot, that it represents that kind of mindset where we feel like we have to confine ourselves to whatever our story is about what we're deserving of or worthy of. And I think there's a difference between living a simple life because that's your value and you want that, and then also having this idea that you have to have some kind of issue with desiring certain things or feeling like you're worthy or unworthy of those things. Like worthiness isn't the same as like our self-worth. The way we perceive our self-worth isn't the same always as what our values are. So sometimes we might have one value system, but we don't even know if we think we're worthy of what our value system is, if that makes sense. And sometimes we don't know that those two things are not in alignment until we get triggered by something like what happened to me with the Jeep. Like I always thought I was worthy of having nice things, but every time I get something nice, it triggers some deeper like subconscious thing of I'm not meant to be that person. And it's weird because it's like I don't realize that those two things are living simultaneously. So things to think about. Again, may not be relative to, you might be a Taurus that thinks you're worthy of all the things and you don't think that's an issue. But it's also interesting. Okay, one more thing. I will say it's interesting what our different ideas are of what like for some people, there's certain things that feel like they've made it. And for other people, it's like another day or whatever, you know, like I know for me, like traveling, like I grew up traveling. So travel, it doesn't mean anything to me. Like, it honestly is exhausting to me and just very like, that sounds like a lot of work. But for some people, having a life where they can travel constantly is like they've made it. Like that's their value, system. And it's like, oh my gosh, they put their self-worth and their value of living their dream life on having all these peak experiences and like traveling and having adrenaline rush and doing all this. And I think I grew up in an environment that valued that so much that I'm very like burnt out. And to me, it's like nice to not have to go anywhere. Like that's very much my like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I get to, live like a grounded, stable, inactive life. In a lot of ways that feels like something I can't believe I get to have. So yeah, it's interesting too, because like our perspective of what decadence or luxury or self-worth or like it's so different to everybody, right? Or like people eating out all the time. Like I don't really care about eating out, but what gives me fulfillment is having a full fridge, like having food at home that I can just have whatever I want accessible to me at home. That's like, to me, that makes me feel luxurious and fulfilled. But for some people, it's going out and eating out all the time. And that's totally cool. Like, that's great, but it's like we all have these different versions of what those stories are. So if you're not feeling worthy of something, unpack the story because it might not really be something that you have to, believe anymore. All right, Taurus, that was a tangent. I'm sorry. We're going to say goodbye now. If you liked this video, hit the like, subscribe. You can follow me at ladyofleosure.com, at Lady of Leosure on Instagram. I'm also on thesobercurator.com, and I will see you all next month.